Why the world is in such, I would say, dire straits right now. You'll gain a whole nother insight as to what is going on in the world economy. Let's just stay macro, keep it super simple.
This next moment, I think, sets the stage for everything that's going to happen in this country moving forward. It is incredibly crucial, what amounts to pretty darn close to 90% of human population that is undermining the dominance of the West and the Western hegemony, and to do it properly with commodity backing. I'll take you down a pathway that will help connect the dots, because I think it's important. There's a term in literature called the fallacy of composition, which you look at a whole bunch of individual pieces and in and of themselves, they don't have the significance that they do when they're all put together. I started noticing really in 2017, and by 2019, I was convinced that I was onto something. And since then, I have followed this thread. And what's interesting is that the thread keeps accelerating really to where we are today, where it's becoming painfully obvious, as far as I'm concerned, that this is the direction things are going. So I'm going to take you down a path starting in 2017 and let yourself and your listeners decide for themselves if this is indeed correct, if I'm heading down the right path or not.
I think you nailed it so hard. What you're doing is you're putting the whole puzzle together.
I really noticed things starting to change in 2017, Robert. I noticed that out of nowhere, the German Bundesbank made a very big deal about repatriating their gold in 2017. Now, this was at the tail end of what had amounted to a 6-year bear market in precious metals. And in 2017, in particular, it was a rough year to own a precious metals company. You had Bitcoin really taking off. You had the equity markets doing fantastic. And gold was languishing, and central banks were selling it. It didn't make any sense to me. Why would the central banks be selling gold? I guess, well, maybe because it's been in the midst of a downdraft, and there's this new thing called Bitcoin that's really starting to take off. And maybe we were just moving away from the old way of doing things, and we're moving into a new reality. And capitulation came to mind. And in 2017, 6 out of every 10 orders that we did were people selling. Most of them aggravated that Bitcoin, which was supposedly cut from the same cloth as gold, was accentuating itself. And why wasn't gold? Out of nowhere, the German Bundesbank, who had attempted to start repatriating their gold a year or two earlier from the Federal Reserve in New York, finally made a big deal about it publicly. And they said, hey, send us back all of our gold. Now, it's important to understand that really, since the end of World War II, the United States held most of the world's gold. And the reason, in a nutshell, that we did was that at the end of World War II, at Bretton Woods, when the dollar was anointed the world reserve currency, we made a promise to the world saying, hey, you can give us your gold because it's safe over here. You've gone through 2 world wars and it's safe over here. And I'll tell you what, we'll pay you $35 an ounce for your gold. And in turn, you take the proceeds of that and you buy our U.S. treasuries. And this will give you a return on a non-interest-bearing asset, and it will be held safely, and we will always sell it back to you for $35 an ounce. Now, it had been that way for a very long time, and as I get down this pathway, we'll get to that moment where that all changed. Germany says to the West, give us back our gold. And within a few weeks of that happening, the Bank of Austria, the Bank of Hungary, the Bank of Turkey, Czech National Bank, Dutch National Bank, all of these banks followed suit, said the same thing, give us back our gold. And they said it not only to the New York Fed, but also to the Bank of England. We want to repatriate our gold. And this is really strange at this moment, because here we are in the midst of a downdraft in gold that is now going on 5-6 years, and the central banks are repatriating their gold.
This is 2017, so not that far away. Okay.
That's right, 2017. And now my interest is piqued. Hey, something's going on here. The central banks are increasing their gold holdings quietly and repatriating them even when gold isn't doing much. In 2018, the following year, you guys, those same groups that repatriated their gold bought more gold as a group than they did in the 60 years combined previously. So now something's really going on. These banks are repatriating their gold from the Fed and the Bank of England, and now they're buying copious amounts of it. Really interesting. In 2019, those numbers were up nearly 100% in terms of central bank purchases. It's really ramping up. Central banks not only have repatriated their gold, but now they're really buying it. And this is perplexing until mile marker number 1. Now, before I tell you mile marker number 1, I'd like people watching this to ask themselves, how much of this do I really know? And ask yourselves, is the media that is supposedly telling us the truth really telling us what is important? Because I view some of the things I'm about to tell you as the most significant events, not only in my career, but ultimately in all of our lives. And I think maybe you'll understand what I'm getting at. We'll start talking about these substantial, significant events that should really have been noticed by the public, but haven't. And I want people who are watching this to ask themselves, why? Why do I not know about this? Because they are very, very significant. Mile marker number 1, 2019, after the banks have just massively accumulated for the past 2.5 years and repatriated all of their gold, you have to wonder, were they clued into what I'm about to tell you? The Bank of International Settlements, which is the central banker's central bank in Basel, Switzerland, in April of 2019, quietly reclassified gold as the world's only other Tier 1 reserve asset. Now, since 1944, at the end of the war, there had only been one Tier 1 asset recognized by the central banks, and that was US dollars and treasuries. It's a riskless asset. And now, out of nowhere, they levy gold from Tier 3, where only 50% was valued on the balance sheet, to Tier 1, where it's as good as cash or equal to cash. Very, very quietly. And it makes you wonder, were the other central banks clued in by the BIS that, hey, get your gold home and start accumulating it? I happen to believe the answer is yes to that question.
If I may add something, that was also the year the repo market crashed, September 17th, 2019.
And that's when people started waking up to what was going on.
And I'm going, what the heck is going on there? When the repo market crashes, the last time that happened was 2008. So that's what I was watching.
Absolutely. Has been instrumental in a lot of my thinking, including calling where we are now Bretton Woods 3, which really fits in towards the end of what I'm going to talk about, a system dominated by commodities rather than by Western debt instruments. And that is where he says we are right now. He's the repo market expert. But yes, you can see my dad has this funny analogy for life. It's kind of like a roll of toilet paper. You don't notice it when it's spinning slowly, when it's a fresh roll, but over time it starts to spin faster and you become more cognizant to the cardboard underneath. Well, that's kind of what's happening to me here in 2020. The roll's starting to spin faster and I'm connecting these dots.
Wait, tell your dad I like his metaphor. It fits my mentality about a toilet paper roll. It does fit.
I will. So in 2020, we start to see some more things that I'm connecting the dots to, one of which is mile marker number 2. Again, ask yourselves, people, have you heard of this? And if not, ask yourselves, why? Am I watching the wrong stuff? Am I reading the wrong stuff? And I would answer, yes, you probably are if you haven't heard about this. Now, this, what I'm about to tell you about, started a few years before, but really started to gain steam in 2020. And I look at this as maybe the most significant event in most of our lives to this point, and that is the foundation of the Chinese Belt Road Rail Initiative. Most people I talk to have not a clue what that is, and it's incredibly impactful and incredibly significant on the West and the West's future, because what it is the most ambitious infrastructure project ever attempted in human history. It is connecting Asia and Africa, parts of Europe, and even parts of South America, the old Silk Road plus, through maritime channels, bridges, railways, roads, and this infrastructure program will only be patrolled by military and commerce. It is the Panama Canal on steroids, but what people need to understand is just this particular little infrastructure represents over 75% of human population and 45% of GDP before, global GDP, even before it's industrialized, and realize just how significant this really is. The contracts and the settlement on the new Belt Road is predominantly being settled in the new Chinese digital yuan. This is a very, very, very big deal because for the last 3 years, the digital yuan has successfully transacted upwards ends of $20 billion in trades and in settlements, even using it at the Winter Olympics. And I would like to call this a beta test. We'll get back to that as we progress. But really big deal where 75% of human population is beginning to be indoctrinated into a new currency, into a new settlement system. This ambitious infrastructure project is void of American participation and void of dollar settlement, almost exclusively and entirely.